Once upon a very long time ago, I'd been asked to adapt Peter Pan for a rather schmaltzy musical with Mia Farrow and Danny Kaye. I'd actually never read the play before. I'd never even seen the cartoon, but my mum had a copy and she urged me to read this very long dedication that Barrie wrote, in which he talks in enigmatic terms about how he came to write Peter Pan for these 5 brothers, whom he doesn't name, he merely gives them numbers. But whoever they were, there seemed to be a heart-rending story in the sense that you had this author who clearly didn't have any children of his own writing Peter Pan, or his dream child as he called it, for these boys who then gradually outgrew him and, as he said, went on their way singing other songs. And this whole business of growing up touched a deep chord in me, having never much wanted to do so myself. And I suppose in a rather cowardly sense I thought that I could bear some of my own feelings by telling this story about Barrie and these boys.
I suppose I always knew that I made Peter by rubbing the 5 of you violently together as savages with 2 sticks to produce a flame. That is all he is, the spark I got from you. Some of you were not born when that story began, and yet were hefty figures before we saw that the game was up. What was it that made me eventually give to the public, in the thin form of a play, that which had been woven for ourselves alone? Alas, I know what it was. I was losing my grip. One by one, as you swung monkey-wise from branch to branch in the wood of make-believe, you reached the tree of knowledge. Soon you knew it only as the vanished wood, for it vanishes if one needs to look for it. In these circumstances, I suppose, was begun the writing of the play of Peter Pan.
Barrie was born in Scotland in 1860, but in the late 1880s moved to London and soon became a best-selling author as well as a playwright, and married the star of his first London play, Mary Ansell, and was living near Kensington Gardens, where most days he was to be seen taking their dog Porthos for a walk. Now, Barrie never grew much beyond 5'2", 5'3", whereas Porthos was a huge St. Bernard who towered above him when walking on his hind legs, so that it wasn't long before this bizarre sight caught the attention of a small boy called George, out walking with his young brother Jack and their baby brother Peter still in his pram, the 3 of them under the very watchful eye of their nurse Mary Hodgson. Well, Barrie soon began entertaining George and Jack with stories of what Peter, their baby brother Peter that is, got up to when the night lights were out, and gradually Peter and Peter Pan became one.
There's something else too. I found them in old Solomon's cave. Do you think the fairies left them for me?
Left what?
Nothing.
Well, what is it?
Shall I? The fairies left them for me.
Fairies.
You don't believe in them, I take it.
No. Why should I?
Well, it's up to you, of course. But I can tell you this. Every time a small boy says, I don't believe in fairies, there is a fairy somewhere in the world that falls down dead.
He's right, you know.
Oh, love me, I must have killed tons of them. Let's have a look.
Yes, they're panpipes. They've certainly been left by the fairies. Who knows? They might even have been left by the great god Pan himself.
Wait a minute! Those aren't Pan's pipes. Look, they're Peter's. They're the ones Peter got in his stocking at Christmas.
All right, then. Peter Pan.
Who's Peter Pan?
Who's Peter? Well, everybody knows who Peter Pan is.
Well, I don't. And I think you've just made him up.
And I think you stole those pipes from our nursery.
Absolute poppycock.
How'd they get here then?
Well, I expect... I dare say Peter left him behind when he flew back.
Flew?
That winter, Barrie was at a dinner party where he found himself sitting next to the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, as he later said, Sylvia Llewelyn Davies, accompanied by her husband Arthur. And gradually the penny dropped between them that Sylvia was the mother of these boys he was meeting in the park. So now that the ice was broken, Barrie began calling on them almost every day and escorting George and Jack off to the park, much as I used to do with my friends David and Patsy's son Sasha, who was then aged about 7 or 8, because at that point I had no children of my own. In the spring of 1901, Barrie had begun writing The Little White Bird, in which Peter makes his first appearance in the central chapters that were later published as Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. The Little White Bird is actually a story for adults about a childless bachelor who befriends a boy in Kensington Gardens called David, but clearly based on George, and determines to win him from his mother by telling him stories about the baby Peter Pan's adventures with fairies and gnomes and other hobgoblins after lock-up time.
It is difficult to believe that he walks to Kensington Gardens. He always seems to have alighted there. And were I to scatter crumbs, I opine he would come and peck. He strikes 100 gallant poses in a day. When he tumbles, which is often, he comes to the ground like a Greek god. One day I had been over-friendly to another boy, and after enduring it for some time, David up and struck him. It was exactly as Porthos does when I favour other dogs, so I knew its meaning at once. It was David's first public intimation that he knew I belonged to him.
I wrote a brief outline of Barrie's relationship with the Davies boys and sent it to the BBC, who commissioned a 1-hour drama. Meanwhile, my truly amazing researcher, Sharon Good, had tracked down Nico Llewelyn Davies, who was the youngest of these 5 boys, who was living in happy retirement down in Kent. I had assumed that they were all dead, because I knew that Peter had thrown himself under the train at Sloane Square in 1960, because I'd turned up at Sloane Square 20 minutes later, aged 13 or something, cursing my misfortune at having missed such a spectacular event. But to our surprise and delight, Nico was still alive and welcomed us, more or less with open arms, and shared this great treasure trove of memories and photograph albums and family letters and this, that and the other, to the point that I had to go back to the BBC, to my producer, Louis Marks, and beg not 60 minutes, but how about 4.5 hours? And not 3 months in which to write it, but how about a couple of years? And to my eternal astonishment and gratitude, the BBC actually agreed. Up until then, I thought it was a wonderful story, but I thought it would just be one of many stories that one writes in one's life, and that I would write it, and that would be the end of it. I never thought that it would become almost a way of life.
It is very sweet and kind of you to write to me from the throne, which is what I take your present residence to be. He is a gorgeous boy, is Delight, which was your own original name for him in the far back days of last week or thereabouts, when you used to hug Peter with such sudden vehemence that I'm sure he wondered whether you were up to anything. I don't see how one could have expected him to be a girl. You're so good at boys. And this, you know, is the age of specialists. May he always be a dear delight to you, and may all your dreams about all of them come true. Ever yours, J.M.B.
By the time Peter Pan the play opened in December 1904, Barrie's affections had begun to shift towards Michael. There was never any sense of the king is dead, long live the king. Barrie's relationship with these boys actually intensified as they grew into young adults. Whereas George, Jack and Peter had all been on the scene prior to Barrie's arrival, Sylvia had conceived Michael in the autumn of 1899, at the height of Barrie's honeymoon with the Davies family.
My dear Michael, Paris is looking very excited today, and all the people think it's because there were races yesterday. But I know it is because tomorrow is your birthday. I wish I could be with you and your candles. You can look at me as one of your candles, the one that burns badly, the greasy one that is bent in the middle. But still, hurrah! I am Michael's candle. I wish I could see you putting on the Redskins' clothes for the first time. Won't your mother be frightened? Nick will hide beneath the bed and Peter will cry for the police. Dear Michael, I'm very fond of you, but don't tell anybody. The end. J.M. Barrie.
Michael was the one. He was the most sensitive of the five. He was the one, as Nico said, closest to genius. Michael was that dream child in reality. And as he grew up, Barrie in many ways regarded him as his own son.
Who do you like best?
Best of who?
Me and Nico and Peter and Jack and George.
Well,
Oh, and you're not allowed to say all the same.
Jack.
Liar.
Peter.
Liar.
Well, if you know the answer, why ask the question?
I just like to hear you say it.
You flatter yourself, don't you?
What's the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you?
Most exciting thing that ever happened to me was something beginning with M.
Money?
Besides money.
Mother?
Warmer.
Michael! Me!
You can see the balls, even me.
But it is me, isn't it? Oh, do say it's me. I won't tell anyone.
All right. It pains me to confess it, yes. Me is the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. Not you, mind. Me.
But at least I'm the second most exciting thing, aren't I?
Oh, no. Second most exciting thing that ever happened to me was when a school friend of mine came running up to the house one day and told me that an old man who used to give us sweeties had slit his throat with a razor, and if I hurried, I'd see the blood.
Did you?
I most certainly did. It was just about the most thrilling thing I've ever seen. There was enough blood to make us black puddings for 6 months. And now it's my turn. Why don't you go skiing with the others?
To be with you. Till death us do part.
Hold out your wedding finger.
Why?
Go and blow a smoke ring on it.
But we're both boys.
You speak for yourself.
You're a boy too.
No. I'm what is commonly known as grown up.
You're not common and you're definitely not grown up. You're old, but you're not grown up. You're one of us.
I tried wherever possible to keep to the dramatic truth in telling this story, but when it came to the scenes between Barrie and first George and then Michael, I could only draw on my own experience because there was nothing committed to paper, and for that I had Sasha, who'd flattered me by calling me old but not grown up. He said, "You're one of us." So I pinched that line and gave it to Michael. Probably the best lines in the script, I think, came uncredited from Sasha, just as Barrie had a tendency to use lines from the boys. But by now I'd turned 30 and was itching to have a few boys of my own. Not just fellow adventurers, but like a latter-day Frankenstein, I could put into practice all my theories that I'd been building up over the years on how I would bring up my child, my boy. Unfortunately, well, at least for me, my first son, David, was very wisely whipped off by his mother, and so I only ever saw him in the holidays. But my second boy wasn't quite so lucky. Alexander Kingdom Nico Birkin was born on the 9th of December 1980, my birthday, when the world was still reeling from the death of John Lennon. When the Peter Pan chapters from The Little White Bird were republished as Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens in 1906, with those famous illustrations by Arthur Rackham, Barrie dedicated the book to Sylvia and Arthur Llewelyn Davies and their boys, my boys, the words "my boys" being in brackets. Arthur died of cancer the following year. Barrie and his wife divorced in 1909, and Sylvia pursued Arthur to the grave the following summer, leaving her 5 sons in Barrie's care, both financially and emotionally. Thus the brackets around "my boys" had finally been removed. "Beware," wrote Barrie in one of his notebooks, "or you may get what you want."
My dearest Sylvia, 4 years now, and once again I offer you an account of the boy's progress under my hopelessly inadequate guardianship. I say inadequate because none knows so well as I how irreplaceable a mother is to a growing boy. However, I try as best I can, and they are my main reason for going on. George has now come to 21 years, and I think you and Arthur can be well proud of your eldest born. And oh, how I long to have him with me at all times, helping me guide the destinies of the other 4.
Take his dummy out. I want to record his vocal cords on the 29th of January 1981 in living stereo. My son Alexander soon became known as Anno, after his favourite book as a child, Anno's Journey. Being a scriptwriter, I often used to write all night, so was happily on hand for my tea break, which was roughly 5 a.m, when B would hand him over to me and then stumble off back to bed, bleary-eyed, leaving Anna and I for the next few hours together, building the train room or rummaging through books or exploring rooftops together. In fact, the only big rows B and I ever had were to do with our 2 rather different, very different definitions of safety.
Oh, Alexander, that was the... Oh, you poor...
What a clunk.
Oh.
He was just about perfection, Anna. Very expressive, very funny, very willful, but also incredibly sensitive.
I'm going to read you the story of Peter Rabbit.
B always said Anna had been born with 1 layer of skin short.
Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter.
Jack and Peter I rarely see these days. And it is Michael who is now the real business of my life. He has become more reserved than ever, and I think few have suffered the loss of a mother as he has done. He continues to be persecuted by nightmares, and I'm in a constant tremble when thinking about him, which is ever a day and night affair. It will be no surprise when I tell you that he has the true stuff of the poet in him. He and George are as different as 2 brothers can be. Yet they are as vital to me as my golf and my pipe.
When Anno was 4, B and I had a second son, Ned. Anno arrived at the hospital with a hammer and a bag of crisps. But as much as my 3 boys shone in their own way, I was quietly hoping that one of them would become a Michael. As a boy, Anno seemed much more like George. And then a sort of miracle occurred because he suddenly started devouring Baudelaire and Rimbaud and Whitman and Eliot and the 2 Dylans, Bob and Thomas, Led Zeppelin, Zen Buddhism, Radiohead, a huge number of influences. He began learning the guitar when he was about 12 and was already composing songs. But around his 15th birthday, he started writing poetry.
Time alone spent thinking, drinking sorrow in its purest form. Time spent waiting for tomorrow. Time, or lack thereof, is taking over, and my grave is getting closer. And though I'm miles away, my arms are open, and I'm hoping for an accident, some tragic intervention of the gods.
It was around this time that a couple of American producers asked me to make a film based on J.M. Barrie and the Lost Boys, the biography I'd written after finishing the television trilogy. I turned it down for various reasons, not least that I couldn't see the point of trying to condense such a complex story down to the length of a Hollywood biopic. But as I watched, and painfully experienced Anno getting on with his own life, it slowly dawned on me that my connection with him was not so different from Barrie's with Michael. George had been killed in the First World War, a devastating blow to Barrie, yet George had been engaged and was already about to fly the nest, whereas Michael was still in his mid-teens. As the war dragged on and Michael approached 18, Barrie's very real fear was that he would be called up and killed, or at least shell-shocked like Peter, and that he simply couldn't bear. Because by this time, Barrie had become not only emotionally dependent on Michael, but creatively also.
Michael had a long summer's day, and I turned round twice, and now he's off to school. And while still a schoolboy, the sternest of my literary critics. Anything he shook his head over I abandoned, and conceivably the world has thus been deprived of many masterpieces. There was, for instance, an unfortunate little tragedy which I liked until I foolishly told Michael its subject, when he frowned and said he'd better have a look at it. He read it, and then, patting me on the back, as only he and George could touch me, said, "You know, you can't do this sort of thing." End of a tragedian. Sometimes, however, Michael liked my literary efforts, and I walked in the azure that day when he returned Dear Brutus to me with the comment, "Not so bad."
I too walked in the azure that day when Anno read my script of Napoleon and told me, "Don't change a word," other than the ones he'd changed for the better while reading it. Typical of Anno, he'd also scribbled a poem of his own on one of the blank pages.
There's this man, and he walks like a broken old bird. And he's known from the sounds of his shackles that rattle and bang as they hang from his back like an emperor's robe for the stricken. His blood, it runs thicker than wax, and it bleeds far colder and blacker than midwinter nights. Where splinters of heat hit his heart, they are beaten and broken apart by the might of his fear. There's this girl. She's near to my heart in the strangest of ways. She's near to my sense of religion. There's always some lousy division these days between the mind and the body, but my feeling of her comes from deeper down still. It begins in the pit of my stomach, with fear and devotion beside it. I want to protect her from all of the world and its claws and her claws and the jaws of self-loathing that loom and are closing round us like a tomb. The pain of the people I love is as vast and as thirsty as valleys of death who call up to our Lord, "Give us rain for our earth." And the souls of the people I love are like birds that won't come and be caught by the words of some clumsy Neanderthal.
The Great War ended 2 days before Michael was due to be called up. He was now 18 and had won just about every prize Eton had to offer. His school reports glowed, as did Anna's, but he now faced the dilemma of either going up to Oxford or following his own instinct and heading for Paris to study art. Anna was equally torn between university or pursuing his passion. He wrote to Bea and me, "All that exists is the music, the music, the music. And the whole time I'm wondering why I'm letting school eat me alive." I realised the great joy that came with my exam results was not so much the grades, more a thing of, now I'm free. And yet I'm not free.
What's the point in having a car if you won't let me go anywhere?
No, it's not you going anywhere. You can go where you like.
To Paris?
Yes, Paris, if you must.
But you said the other day...
Yes, well, I know. That was the other day.
Do you really mean it?
If it amuses you.
It would only be for August.
Fine, fine. Now can we read through the scene?
Oh, play if you like.
Why did you say this summer holidays?
Well, August.
Oh dear, what a pity. Still, let's start from the top of page 94, shall we?
What's the pity?
I was just, I'd taken a place in Scotland for the summer holidays. It's an island, actually, off the west coast. But if you'd rather go skiing with the others...
You never told me.
Well, naturally, it wasn't meant to be a surprise. It said, no matter. Page 94. Of course, you could always bring Roger. I mean, you can bring who you like. We've got the whole island. It's a regular Robinson Crusoe island, by all accounts. Alien Shona.
Barrie used many of Michael's ideas and actually bought him a cottage by way of payment, as well as renting a Llewelyn Shona for the summer holidays.
A wild, rocky island it is, too. It almost takes the breath away to find so perfectly appointed a retreat on these wild shores. Superb, as is the scene from the door. Michael, who has already been to the top of things, says it's not what is revealed there. All the Western Isles of Scotland lying at our feet.
I was a little less generous with Anno in return for his very considerable help on my next hack script for Hollywood, but at least it was enough to convert one of our old Welsh barns into a studio and buy him a new guitar. We note in passing how both Barrie and I used wanton bribery in order to keep our muses within striking distance.
We are a very Etonian household, and there is endless shop talk during which I am expected to be merely the ladler out of soup. Do my letters seem aged? I certainly feel so here. I have a conviction that they secretly think it indecent of me to play tennis, which, however, I'm only suffered to do as a rare treat. They run about and gather balls for me, and in their politeness almost offer to hold me up when it's my turn to serve. By the way, what an extraordinarily polite game tennis is. The chief word in it seems to be sorry, and admiration of each other's play crosses the net as frequently as the ball. I fancy this is all part of the something you get at public schools and can't get anywhere else. I feel sure that when any English public school boy shot a Boche, he called out, "Sorry!" If he was hit himself, he cried, "Oh, well shot!"
Anno had only left school a few weeks when he fell, or rather plunged, in love with the actress Mila Jovovich, with whom I was working on Joan of Arc, a fraught but highly creative entanglement for both of them that well and truly lit Anna's fuse.
Steal me. Melt my gold centre. I enter through your dreams where you are weak and where I'm clean of inhibition. I'm killing this body, this prison of flesh, this heart and this head that you loved, put to rest. But I'll see you in sleep, when I'm perfect.
Listen to me, Michael. A year ago, you wanted to study classics. And then you wanted to study music. And then you wanted to study poetry. Now you want to study art. I mean, how do you know that in a month's time you might not want to study politics or Freudian psychology? God forbid, all right.
You let Jack have his way.
You've always had your way, Michael. You asked for a motor car, I give you a motor car. You asked for a cottage, I give you a cottage. If you ask me for my life, I'll give it to you willingly.
I don't want your life, Uncle Jim.
On New Year's Eve 1999, Anna was at Stanway, by an odd coincidence one of Barrie's old haunts, where he met and fell in love with Honeysuckle Weeks, another actress who won his heart, and was in turn won, not least by his words.
Tomorrow saps my strength before she dawns. As you're not there, you're not born of her reflection, and the cynic in my stomach knows you never will be. Should I die here, in this ecstasy of dreams? Frozen blue, green diamonds in my thoughts. Make me a promise that you will not fade, and promise me you won't forget my name and what I have within my chest for you. Promise me a second of your thoughts, one distant day, when I am cold and clammy, bruised and bloody, lost beneath the waves. Promise me the joy of crying in your name. Promise me you'll hold me when I fade into the night that never wakes. Be there when my last tomorrow breaks, and when she sets, and in your arms. In dreams regret can play no part. Oh, Lord, promise me the stars will not forget what they have seen. And promise me you won't forget that dusty rose that grew from clumsy roots around your heart.
I saw from this place, at the foot of my grave, I gave myself in awe to childish hope and promise.
I always knew 2001 would be an extraordinary year for me. Back in the 1960s, I'd spent 2 years working on Stanley Kubrick's 2001, and ever since had looked forward to the reality of that year with a sense of mounting excitement as well as a certain dread. 2001 began with Anno heading off to India with his brother David, where I later joined him to travel in the footsteps of the Indian mathematician Ramanujan for a film project of ours. In the event, the film never materialized, but Anno came up with something truly stunning of his own.
I'm not naming anyone at
Anna spent a few weeks with me that summer back in Wales. We'd actually been commissioned to write a script together, based on Peter Ackroyd's Hawksmoor, but I realised that our concept of quantum non-locality in time probably wasn't exactly what the studio had in mind. Besides, Anna was in full creative flow with his band KJD, Kicks Joy Darkness, and would soon be heading off to Milan to record their first album. Was he also needing to break away? In a sense, KJD had become his new family, Lee and Billy and Alberto, and certainly their music was a break with the past. I said goodbye to Anno at the beginning of September, when he set off with Ned in his van for Europe, laden to the gills with guitars and amps, only to break down in the middle of France on September the 11th, from where B rescued him and drove him on to Milan. By then, B and I had gone our separate friendly ways, and in October I drove up to Scotland with my new girlfriend in search of inspiration. My Barrie biography was about to be republished, and I wanted to revisit some of the old haunts to photograph them, including Llewelyn Davies, where Michael had spent the summer of 1920 with Barrie and had written his last surviving poem.
Throned on a cliff serene, man saw the sun hold a red torch above the farthest seas, and the fierce island pinnacles put on in his defence their sombre panoplies. Foremost, the white mists eddied, trailed and spun like seekers, emulous to clasp his knees, till all the beauty of the scene seemed one led by the secret whispers of the breeze. The sun's torch suddenly flashed upon his face, and died. And he sat content in subject night, and dreamed of an old dead foe that had sought and found him. A beast stirred boldly in his resting place, and the cold came. Man rose to his master height, shivered, and turned away. But the mists were round him.
We spent 5 wonderfully surreal days on Llewelyn Davies, climbing to the heights where Michael had written his last poem. On the way back we drove beneath Ben Nevis, where years earlier I'd zoomed about in a helicopter, shooting alien landscapes for the final psychedelic sequence in 2001. And it suddenly dawned on me that Anno was now the same age as I'd been then, 1 month short of 21, as was Michael, when he finally gave in to Barrie's wishes and returned to Oxford.
Back again at the flat and thirsting nightly to have you with me, now and at all times. I was very gratified by your last letter, and glad that you understood how I felt about you staying on at Oxford. But my feelings were wrong. I really have no right to hold you there against your will, since I have chosen courage for my rectoral address. And I suppose the rector of St. Andrews should start by practicing it himself. If Paris is where your heart lies, then Paris it must be. And I'm thinking that Paris will be the very place to spend your 21st next holidays. My gift will keep you there in happiness for many months. Though the time while you're away will be loneliness personified to me. I seem to have been waiting an eternity for you to become 21. So that we could get closer and closer to each other without any words being needed. So indeed, I think we are as close in love as two friends can be. Had lunch with your Uncle Gerald today, and I told him what a joy and a pride you are to me. Of course, I'll never mention such things to you. No, I keep it dark. And now for the post. And then the night only. Your loving JMB.
When I reached home from Scotland, the phone was ringing and it was Anno in Italy. They'd just finished recording a rehearsal of their album, and he was brimming with happiness because he knew it was brilliant. We talked about so many things. He just spent Halloween in Venice with Mila and worked on a couple of songs with her. Honeysuckle was about to fly out to record on the album. He just finished reading all Shakespeare's sonnets, as well as half a dozen plays, including Hamlet. And he said, don't you think, if to be or not to be is the question, then to be and not to be must be the answer? And then we started making plans about where to spend our birthday in a month's time, his 21st, my 50 whatever. But the rest of the band were waiting outside. They were off to celebrate Alberto's birthday. Let's see what the morrow brings, said Anno, and was gone. It was only later that I realised he was quoting my father's last words to my mother the night he died. The next morning came the phone call from Italy. Anno had been asleep on the back seat of Alberto's car when he ploughed into another accident in thick, thick mist. Anno and his band were dead.
Sir James Barrie?
Yes?
Oh, I wonder if you could spare me a few moments. My name's Hobson from the Daily Graphic. I was wondering if you could let me have a few more details. Could it have been suicide?
I don't know. What on earth are you talking about?
Well, the drowning. I say, I'm most dreadfully sorry. I thought... Well, we thought...
Go on.
Well, 2 undergraduates were drowned this afternoon in Sanford Pool outside Oxford. They were found together in each other's arms. One of them has been identified as Michael Llewelyn Davies, the adopted son of Sir James... Sir James? I really am most dreadfully sorry.
I'd spent so much time trying to empathise with Barrie's grief at the death of Michael, yet when it finally came to me, it was nothing like I'd imagined at all. Only that initial howl of anguish was the same, to be repeated rhythmically over the succeeding months, but interwoven with an extraordinary sense of, well, there really isn't a word to describe it, but a sense of privilege comes close. Barrie spent 2 days and nights alone with Michael's coffin, but that wasn't my way at all. Many people helped me through my grief, but it was Anno himself who salvaged me with that parting thought of his, to be and not to be, superpositional states as they're called in quantum physics. each defining the other, and yet incomplete without the other. Within moments of hearing the news of his death, I knew Anna was only dead in the physical sense, though God knows that's the sense that matters most. But I made an absolute commitment to Anna there and then that I would make sure his poems would not go the way of Michael's, all but 2 of which mysteriously disappeared over time. I set to work almost at once, transcribing the hundreds of poems we found. None of us had any idea he'd written so many. But there came the inevitable day when I couldn't get it together at all. For all my philosophy, I just kept breaking down in tears. So I went back to bed, climbed up the ladder to my loft, and Ned was there, which didn't altogether surprise me, because he often came up to my loft when he had a nightmare or couldn't get to sleep. And I said, "Ned, what are you doing here?" And he turned over, and it was Anno. And I said, "Anno?" And he said, "Shh, you're taking it much too seriously." And I woke up at that moment, never having remembered going up the ladder and falling asleep in the first place. And I knew he was right. And that was my big step forward.
Dear Elizabeth, all the world is different to me now. Michael was pretty much my world. Do you know that this day a year ago Michael was alive, and as well as any of us? And the next day he was dead. That is really why I'm writing to you today. I feel that he is at Oxford today, in his rooms, and that tomorrow he's going out to be drowned, and doesn't know it.
On a scrap of paper, Anna had scribbled, "Who said the race is over?" And I thought that was brilliant, and called the book of his poems just that. Who Said the Race is Over has so far sold over 4,000 copies. Not bad for poetry. Next year it comes out in French, hopefully other languages, including Swahili, as the prophets have allowed us to set up Anno's Africa, a project to help the street kids of Nairobi discover the joy of expressing themselves, as Anno was able to do, before so many of them inevitably join him sooner rather than later, in the ongoing race among the stars.
There's hope, despite time and its mindless pillage that seizes our bodies. This wreckage that's left, that we're left with, that's nobody's robe. We are thrown in the hope we will give it some noble demise, like to flame or to ashes or flashes of light that will humble the mightiest men. And then, when the worms are upon us, they'll know how to become us as gently as possible, after all of the jostles of life. That was Anno's last poem.
And soon to return, there's soon to be fire in my veins again. I'm almost home. I'm almost ready.
In The Lost Boys by Andrew Birkin, J.M. Barrie was played by Ian Holm, George Barnaby Holm, Jack Nicholas Barton, Michael Alexander Buss and William Milton. Poetry by Anno Birkin was read by Ian Holm, B. Gilbert and Alice Coulthard. Elaine Shona by Michael Llewelyn Davies was read by Daniel Evans. The music was by Molly Nyman and Anno Birkin with Kicks Joy Darkness. The producer was Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for BBC Radio 4, and you can read more of Anno Birkin's poetry at his website, anno.co.uk.